We're going to look at step 3 of the steps to freedom, and that step is usually one of the most difficult ones for people to go through because it's the forgiveness step. And I like what Anderson wrote in his version of the steps, what forgiveness is and what it isn't. In our culture today, how do you think our culture, okay, not Christian culture, but the American culture would define forgiveness? What would they equate forgiveness with?
Acceptance of whatever.
Just saying forgiven. I'm sorry, that's it, it's done.
Yeah, but allowing, like not having boundaries, like whatever the person wants to do, you forgive them and allow them to do it.
Okay. Any other input?
Some people won't forgive.
Some people won't, right, because
Some people will hold that up against you for the rest of their life or something, but I don't know, that's not a real definition. But
okay, when you hear a situation where a family member's had a criminal act, done against them, and then you go to the courtroom and then you see family members say, but we forgive them, and how do people react to that? Are you crazy? Mm-hmm. Why? Because they equate forgiveness with saying what you did was okay, don't worry about it. They equate it with some sort of passive, don't worry about it, it's no big deal. Because the world says if it's a big deal, you should never forgive. You should hold that against, how can you forgive them? Because if you forgive them, you're saying it's okay. No, it's not okay. Forgiveness is choosing to live with and deal with the consequences of another person's choice. And that stinks a lot of times. That's probably one of the hardest elements of forgiveness, is that when you forgive that debt, when a person wrongs us, or when we wrong someone else, there's a debt involved. Okay? A simple example in the Old Testament, if somebody stole a sheep from their neighbor, what was the law saying? You had to pay back, you had to give the sheep back plus what? 4 or 5 more, something like that. There were stipulations, depending on what you took, that you had to replace what you took and add to it XYZ, number of animals, okay, critters. There was a debt. There wasn't just an even, oh, give it back. It was, you took that and you owe me. All right? So when someone wrongs us, we get that natural inclination of, you owe me. And we want to see that payback. We want to see them pay for what they did. It's interesting that it's some Greek dude. This is it begins with an H, and I can't come up with it, and I rarely can. Unless I don't really need to remember it, then it comes to me. But ancient Greece, if you murdered someone and they caught you and they determined you're the one that killed that person, what they would do is strap that person's dead body to you. And not only would that be disgusting, but the rottenness of the corpse would kill you. Very slow, painful, disgusting thing. Okay? That's what bitterness is. When we choose not to forgive, we're in essence hooking ourselves to the wrong that they did to that person. The rottenness of what they did to us is going to rot us. Okay? Now, one of the things the Lord taught me a number of years ago, a key person in my life did something, said something, really deeply wounded me. And I've told this story many, many times. And I remember because it was on a Tuesday evening, and it was a conversation that took place between counseling sessions. I had a 7 o'clock session. I had an interaction probably by phone with a person, and whatever was said really wounded me. I had to go into an 8 o'clock session, keep it together, get through the session, and then, after, I knew it was a Tuesday night because Home Improvement was on that night. And, so the wound happened, and I think, it was either before or after the session, I just quickly went through step 3 and said, okay, Lord, I forgive so-and-so for this because it made me feel, just walk through it and didn't mean a word of it. Anyway, so I went through the session, got through it, drove home, watched home, and the Holy Spirit was like, you need to deal with this. I'm like, la, 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 you know, and I'm like, I watch Home Improvement to try to escape what happened and not think about it. I'm going to bed that night, and the Holy Spirit's like, you cannot let the sun go down in your anger. This relationship's too important. Well, the enemy will get foothold. So I much more sincerely prayed through step 3, as it is written there. You know, Lord, I choose to forgive, named the person, and then I named the offense. And then I said, you know, it makes me feel hurt, angry, whatever, all the emotions connected with it. I chose to leave that at the cross, asked the Lord to reclaim the ground. Was able to sleep pretty well. Got up the next morning, and there was still something between me and the Lord. And the Lord said, well, you know, if someone wounds me, my natural flesh reaction is to get a little bit of passive-aggressive behavior going. In other words, stay away. You know, walls are up, shields up. I fly through life like a star. I hate Star Trek, but like with my shields in place, you know, just in case that Klingon may come past and shoot at me or something like that. So I'll fly through the relationship with my shields up. My defenses are in place. And the Holy Spirit took me to Romans chapter 12, in verse 18, if possible, as much as it depends on you, be at peace. And there's some conditions there. Okay. If possible. There are times when it's not. Why? Because the other person makes it impossible. Because they're continuing to lock and load and shoot. Okay? But in this case, all those conditions were met, and I needed to live at peace. Now, what the Lord impressed on me was flying through that relationship with my shields up was a defensive war posture. I was treating them like the enemy. Okay? And so I was just thrilled to learn that. I was like, all right. And I just visualized bringing the walls down. And I had, it just so happened I had to re-engage in that relationship the next day. I had to talk to that person for a variety of reasons, and I really felt release. So I came to the Lord the next day in my prayer time, and I was like, man, what's going on? I still had some sort of roadblock between me and the Lord. And he says, well, now you need to choose to love that person again. And I'm like, no. Not gonna. Nope. Because one of the things, and I really believe this goes all the way back to the death of my brother, was that I learned, you know, if you don't care about somebody, they can't hurt you. That was one of the lies the enemy. So, in other words, if they die, the death is the ultimate rejection. Okay, how dare they die? You know, we don't think of it through that way, but that's how emotionally we'll filter it. And so early on in my life, the enemy got in there and said, if you don't care about people, then they can't hurt you, aka die. Okay, and so, you know, that has impacted me, but it's also been part of how do you handle relationships. Well, if they've hurt you, what do? You stop loving, because if you don't love them, they can't hurt. You understand the insane logic of what the enemy throws at us. And so the Lord was, look, you've got to re-engage and you've got to choose to love. And here's the lie you're believing, Robin. You were designed to love. When you're not loving, you're going against the very design I have as a human in the image of God. And really all I was doing was living in denial land. I don't love that person. I don't love that person. No, I'm designed to do it. That's my natural bent as a human created in the image of God, is to love. Now, what do I mean by love? I mean agape. Okay, I mean choosing to set aside my self-interest to serve the best interest of another, no matter what it costs. And here's the last part that's so stinking hard, no matter how they treat me in return.
Yeah.
You know, it's really hard. when you get rejection back, when you get hurt back. It really is.
Work in the post office
It's really hard,
every day.
okay?
Space is good.
But then, you know, as I was looking at the Lord and hearing Him, and I said, okay, Lord, I can't do this, but you can. You're going to have to love this person through me, you know. And the very next thing He spoke into my spirit, I'll never, ever, ever forget. And He says, you know what, Robin, I do that for you every day. And I'm like, yeah. Every time I sin, choose to eat too much cheesecake, you know, do whatever it is, I wound God. It hurts Him to know that I'm choosing something other than Him to try to meet my need for whatever. But He knows the very next time I'm going to sin against Him. Because what we often will get into is, I'll forgive that person as long as they never do this to me again. You know, I'll forgive them, but you got to protect me from them ever doing that again. No, they're going to do it again in some way, shape, or form. Just like I sin against, how many days? I don't know how many times I sin against God, a day, in a week, or whatever. But He knows the very next time I'm going to sin. And you know what He's always doing? Covering me with the blood of the Lamb. In fact, all of my sins, past, present, future, have been paid for in full. Now, one of the things I took away from this whole thing as I pondered it was that there are 3 steps to forgiveness. That very first step, that very first prayer, and again, what's written in there, is an act of worship or an act of worthship. In other words, when I forgive, I am saying the blood of the Lamb is so far more valuable, has such great worth, that it can pay the penalty for whatever this person did to me. I'm unhooking from that person to pay their debt. And I'm saying, you know what? The debt that Jesus paid on the cross is going to cover that. And so I'm going to worship the blood of the Lamb in this act of forgiveness. So it makes that first part really cool and a whole lot easier. It's not 100% easy, but it takes my focus off of them and off of this mindset of, well, then they're going to get off the hook, or they're not going to pay, or that. No, I'm going to worship the Lord and say, you know what, you're the only one that can pay this, and so I'm going to cover what they did with the blood, and I'm going to honor the blood by doing this. Okay. Now that second step again is choosing to be at peace. Now, if the person, look, if I'm in a situation where I've got a client who's being abused in whatever shape or form, I'm not going to send them back to, I'm going to help them work through forgiving their abuser, but I'm not going to send them back to their abuser. Okay? I'm going to do everything I can to get them away from the abuser. But there are times in relationships where they become so toxic because of the other person. You just make sure, what I'm saying is, you make sure that relationship is you're doing your part to bring it to peace. If that person makes it impossible, you have the right to keep your shields up and to withdraw. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
It's like the most loving thing that you can do for them.
Yeah, and the other people in your life and your own well-being. You know, if that person is so encompassed with bitterness and hatred and sin, and so under the influence of darkness that they can't see their problem and their issue, then you have every right to step back. Unfortunately, I know some churches that will send wives back to abusive husbands, saying, you know, going to texts where, I guess it's 1 Corinthians, I think, you know, where, you know, you don't know if you're going to win your unbelieving husband, and then there's the, I'm getting the reference wrong, but it's basically wives submit to your husbands, and win them with a gentle and quiet spirit. You win them that way. As they're pounding the crap out of you, no, you leave. You get to a safe place. And then that last thing, like I was talking about, remembering how much God forgives us for, how He chooses every day to agape us, and keeping that perspective. Now, I've just laid out a 3-step process that sounds so nice, and put the bow on it. It's hard. It's really hard, especially when the wound is really deep and it comes from a very, very close person. Okay? It can be a process. I will say this, that some wounds are so deep that the Lord will call you to clean out one layer at a time. Because if it goes really deep, and He knows that if He cleaned it all out at once, you would implode. Okay? Usually when a person goes through step 3, they come away feeling like they've had a spiritual colonic. Or a spiritual puking session. When you puke, you feel better when you're done, right? You don't enjoy the process. I don't know anybody that enjoys puking. But once you get that garbage out, you're like, oh, I feel so much better. I don't want to do it again, but I feel so much better, So it's a little bit like forgiveness can be like that when you're giving that stuff over. A couple of the points I want to make is that if you don't touch the emotional core when you walk through forgiveness, just like I did that first time, I just went through rotely and said, Lord, I confess, because I had that one memorized. I didn't touch the emotional core. I didn't touch it at all. I just went through the motions. Okay? You've got to be willing to stir up the emotion a little bit, wrap your arms around it, own it, but then you leave it at the cross. You leave it with Jesus. Here's one of the problems I've encountered for people. They're like, I don't want to give over my pain. Why? Because my pain protects me. No, it doesn't. The only thing pain does is hurt. That's all it does. It's not a shield. It's not a protector. But it reminds me so I don't go back and get hurt again. No. It's not what it does. It's a violation of God's... He wants us to forgive because He knows bitterness will kill us. He just does. He knows that. And we've been forgiven. The other, obviously, we're to forgive as we've been forgiven. Now, 2 things I remind people of when I take them through this step is you initially go through a prayer. You ask the Holy Spirit to search your hidden chambers. Who do I need to forgive? What do I need to forgive them for? Be as specific as possible. Don't just say, I got to forgive my dad for being mean. Well, how was he mean? Okay? So be specific, and then don't forget yourself. And don't forget God. What? What will happen is that things will, and God was on my list too. I had to forgive God. Now I tweaked the prayer and I said, Lord, I confess I've held it against you that this and this and this happened in my life and you didn't stop it. And Lord, I ask you to forgive me for that. And I erase the debt that we sometimes act like accountants in our mind when it comes to wrongs. You heard me say that when somebody wrongs you, in essence, you've just accounted for them to have a debt they owe you. And so I had, as a young teenager, had fallen into that trap with God. Certain things happened in my life that were very painful. And I had asked God for certain things. He gave me the opposite, and that caused me pain. Great deal of pain. And so I'm like, God wronged me. Now I didn't go off on a worldly bender. I was too scared to go off on a prodigal because I had a warped view of God. But I didn't want to be intimate with Him. I would go to church and all that, but stay away. Give Him complete control of my life. Not a chance. He would just make me miserable. He would just hurt me more. That's where my thinking was. Okay? And so when I went through this, I had to choose to erase what I had put in the you owe me column and acknowledge to Him that I was wrong for doing that. Okay? The other thing about ourselves is that we will make wrong choices in our life that lead to consequences that are sometimes lifelong, and then we're like, I know God forgives me, but I can't forgive myself. Oh, okay, so He'll apply the blood to you, but you won't okay. Again, it's because we think that when we forgive ourselves, we're saying what we did was okay. No. We're allowing the blood of the Lamb to take care of it. Yes, we have to live with the consequences. Yes, He's going to give us the grace to deal with that. And hopefully we've learned and we don't do it again. Okay? But forgiveness is one of the most liberating, cleansing, but difficult steps to go through. All right? So I would encourage you, keep short accounts. Keep short accounts. This is why Paul exhorts us in Ephesians. Don't let the sun go down, what? On your anger. Anger is a good indication that you perceive somebody's done you wrong and you need to forgive. Okay? But we need to push past this, but if I forgive them, that means I'm saying what they did was okay. No, what they did was wrong, but you're going to allow the blood of the Lamb to pay. You're going to cover it with the blood, and then as a result, you're worshiping the Lord, which makes it a lot easier to choose to move in that direction. But you're still going to ask the Lord, okay, you're really good at forgiving. You need to forgive this person through me. And He will supply you with the grace to do it. Okay? All right, that's 3. We've done 1, 2, 3, 4. We need 5, 6, and 7. Before I forget, unless I already told you this. I don't know. We may take some time then next week because I didn't get through 5 along with this. We'll see what we can plow through. We're going to have some sort of teaching next week and the week after. I'll bring a nice dessert or something like that, But come January, we're going to move into a study of a variety of, it's a topical study on women in the Bible. All right, so if there's a particular lady you want me to hit upon, say, hey, look at such and such person, just let me know. I'm creating it myself. I'm not going by anybody's book. I hate to use people's books. But we'll just be doing some topical bounce around and look at certain ladies in the Bible. Just to change it up a little bit. I would prefer to stay on prophecy and all that kind of fun stuff and spiritual warfare, but we're going to just take a little break from that, and that's where we're going. All right?